Hi there, this is Dan from Longacre Bees, Sunday the 24th of May. I'm about to do an inspection on this colony. It's a 14 by 12 nuc. I say nuc, but it's on 8 frames. I thought I'd bring you along and do a quick video. Smoker's lit, got a clean hive tool, so away we go. A little bit of smoke around the entrance, and just puff under the floor. Now I've actually got another eek on top of this. I think last time I did an inspection on this one, there was some comb which I had to cut off the bottom of a couple of frames. It already had quite a bit of nectar in there and I didn't want to just bin it, so I just put it in an eek on top. Because it's above their crown board, the bees think it's kind of outside their hive, so they kind of clear up all the nectar that's in there as though they're sort of collecting it from a flower, let's say. So that's where you can see just a load of bees in the top of this box, and a few bits of comb. So just give them a bit more of a puff to get the bees off the comb. They might not go down, but some of them will probably go down the hole. So to start with, I'll just cut away these bits of comb. If you do have that scenario where you've cut some comb off the bottom of a frame, or they've started to build some wild comb if you've accidentally left a gap, it's not a bad way to deal with it, because the bees clear it out completely. So you kind of get this sort of honeycomb that's ready to melt down, that's got no nectar or pollen or anything really in there. I say that they don't often clear out the pollen. And there's a little bit of nectar back in here actually, which suggests that they're pretty full below. There were a few drones in this bit of comb as well. In fact, there's one there that's just about to hatch. Maybe that's a bit of a rude awakening to this world. So being as that's got a bit of nectar in still, I'll put that to one side. I might stick that back in and see what we need to do. But yeah, looks like this hive needs some more space really. Unlikely the queen will be up here, but just always make sure when you're sort of taking components off your hive. Let's get the bees off. So, a little puff of smoke over the top, just to send them down and sort of make them gorge on honey. Quite a thin frame at this end, so I'll start with this one. Yeah, this is actually a Payne's, it's Payne's Polynuc, the one with the integrated feeder. But what I've done is cut the feeder out, sort of filled in the gap that's left where the feeder was, and then stuck a plastic runner basically along the polystyrene. So it's kind of like my kind of modified Payne's Polynuc, which then takes 8 frames instead of 6. But it's a much sort of better size for a Polynuc, because on 6 frames they can soon sort of fill that up, and then you tend to get sort of swarming if you're not careful and you don't catch them soon enough. I'm going to actually have to go around this side because I need the sun over my shoulder to be able to see what's in the frames. I think this is mainly just a bit of nectar in there, and then they've just started drawing that side. So you can see the new sort of comb, freshly drawn, but nothing in that one yet. And that they've just started to sort of fill this patch with nectar, nothing in the bottom. I say that, this might have been a piece of drawn foundation that was put in there. So I'll just pop that down to one side. Again, mainly nectar on that frame. And the same on that one. So they really do need moving up to a wooden hive and a super going on top. I'm not actually sure if I've got any 14 by 12 boxes spare at the moment. Need to build a couple more boxes up. What I might have to do for the time being is steal any kind of nectar that they've put in there, put back some foundation which will give them a bit more space to lay. Now this is into the brood nest. So you kind of got a patch of capped brood up here, stripe where it's kind of emerged, another stripe of capped brood, and another stripe where it's emerged. The queen's already laid back in these, so you can just see eggs and larvae in there. Funny sort of stripe of honey coming all the way down here. There's still a little bit of space for it to lay, but it is looking pretty busy in there. Similar story on this side, sort of brood, some capped, some uncapped, and a queen cup. No concerns about that really. Up there on the frame, it's more the location that you might find a supersedure cell. Go back in. Often when you see bees clustering in a big bunch like that, it could be because there's a queen cell under there, so it's worth just kind of giving them a touch and a sort of move them out of the way, or a blow. Just gently blow on them and they'll move. But it's actually a sort of like a raised lump of open nectar, sort of on that bit of frame. So. So this looks like a relatively new frame because it's much lighter in colour. Even the wax that's got kind of the brood in here is quite sort of like a yellow, a pale yellow, which is an indication it's not very old. Brood pattern looks okay. A little bit patchy in the middle here, but you'll see there tends to be a stripe that kind of runs up and down, and then back up, and that's actually probably following the wire in the foundation. And sometimes they have a tendency not to lay, or the brood doesn't develop in those cells. Possibly something to do with the metal. I don't know. It's a common thing to see, kind of like a line that's following the foundation wire, but don't worry about that. So looks like a nice frame. There is a bit of space still for the queen to lay down the bottom. That's not laid up, or partially laid up, but certainly they haven't drawn these frames right down to the bottom yet, so a bit of space for her yet. So I will say something just about the hive tool. I see a lot of people using the hive tool if I do instruction sort of sessions at the teaching apiary. But the hive tool is really an extension to your hand, and it's to give you a bit more leverage. So when the bees propolize the frames together, you don't need to be puffing smoke all the time, because really when you put the hive tool in, you're only touching each frame, one on either side, in two locations. and it's really just a lever. So put the hive tool in sort of near the end, not necessarily on the lug, and try and put the bit that you want to lever away from the frames that haven't yet been moved towards the outside. So you see I've put the hive tool touch in here and touch in here, and they're really the only two places where you need to kind of just move the bees out of the way before you actually lever the frames apart, and then simply sort of like rotate or push away with the hive tool. And similarly on this side, you don't need to be smoking the bees all the time, because if you just move that gently, the bees will move out of the way, and then the same on this side, you can kind of just lever it, and it's quite effortless when you do use the hive tool in that way. So this frame's a little bit darker, a little bit older, similar to that second or third frame where there's sort of like stripes of brood that's emerged. Again, capped brood. This has been laid back in, it's got larvae that's developing, larvae and eggs, another stripe of capped brood. Bit of pollen you can see sort of coming in around here now. But all looks well on this colony so far. Similar situation on this side. Not a lot of space for the queen to lay. And there was a little queen cup just here. So when I see a queen cup, I usually just sort of pull the side down. Not too concerned, but it means that you don't have to then look in it again. You know you've checked that one. So yeah, this colony was on 6 frames I think, and it was expanded on to 8 frames about a fortnight ago. And this again was one of those newer frames that were put in. You can see it's pale in colour. It just shows that you don't have to kind of always insert that frame right on the edge of the brood chamber, because this was literally dropped in the middle and the bees have filled in. This time of the year when it's nice and warm, there's not an issue with the bees being chilled overnight. And there were plenty of bees in this. It really was needing to be expanded when I moved it, when I increased it onto 8 frames about a fortnight ago. So again, sort of nice sort of like biscuity, papery cappings on this brood chamber, on this brood frame. And again, you can see this line that I was describing kind of coming up through here, which is where the wire of the foundation kind of cuts through. I've just seen the queen, I'll come back with her. So she's burrowing in amongst a load of bees. She's not a massive queen, you can just see her on the frame there. This one's not clipped or marked, so I'll probably do that. What I'll do actually, because I know she's not clipped or marked, I'll do that on the next inspection, and I'll set the camera up a bit closer so you can see the procedure for clipping and marking a queen. So when you've seen the queen, I mean, because there's no real concerns on this hive so far, I'm just going to pop it back in the frame, in the hive, but just be extra careful when you're putting the frame down that's got the queen on, so that you don't sort of squash the frame one side of the hive, the other side of the hive. You don't slam it together too fast. Just gives all the bees, including the queen, a chance to get out of the way of the Hoffman frames as they're coming together. This one's quite heavy. It's got a lot of nectar on, or capped honey. So yeah, there's quite a big sort of arc of capped honey around the top here. This is probably a frame that was in over winter, and they haven't actually kind of used up all that honey. And again, a big stripe. All where these bees are clustering, it's because there's a big thick band of capped honey, and they're even packing it in around the bottom here. They do really need a super on. What I'll probably do is in fact, I'll probably leave it at that. I don't need to necessarily go in this end frame. With there being so much nectar on that one, it's more than likely nectar on this one. These bees definitely need some more space. I've got some standard national brood chambers, and what I'll do is I'll make an eek, which is essentially a raising piece to bring a smaller box up to the size of a different box, or as a spacer on top. I'll actually show the process of putting that hive together, and what I'll do is increase these onto 11 frames and then put a super on top. So I'll get the equipment ready for that, and then I'll do that in the next video. So just to close up, cover board back on, and what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to drop this frame that's got partially covered in some nectar, but mainly drawn, but not filled with anything. I'm going to pop that on in the middle of the chamber, which again will just give the queen somewhere immediately to lay, because they're getting a bit tight for space. So just carefully moving the frames back together. There's quite a bit of wax on some of these self-spacing frames. In fact, I needed a smoker. Just a bit of smoke on these and it'll just get them down out of the way. And they won't be constantly all over my hands when I'm trying to move the frames. Another method for using your hive tool, you can kind of get the hive tool down there in the gap, and use the wide part sort of to lever against the side of the hopping frame. So just using this back part, just sort of pressing against the adjacent frame, and then resting the hive tool just somewhere here on the corner of this frame, and it just allows you to easily sort of like move those frames apart to make space to pop this one back in. They're not going to be too happy with the sort of, in fact, there's quite a bulge of nectar on that one, and I don't want them to build this frame a bit sort of like wonky, so I'll move it across one more. Yeah, if I'm dropping a frame in the middle of a brood chamber like this, I'll try and put it in between two nice flat frames, and that way they'll build this one nice and flat as well. And particularly if they're, if you want them to kind of expand their brood nest onto it, you want that nice sort of like flat frame, because you're maybe going to use that frame for the next 3 to 4 years. So if they build it nice and true and straight, it's going to be a good frame that makes the colony easy to manage on future inspections. It's not quite such a concern in the super, because each year when you harvest that honey, you can cut that super frame back so it's flat with the frame, and if there's any big bulges, you kind of can you can deal with that at the time of extracting. So I've got 2 crown boards here. One's got a hole in, which is used for feeding sort of later on in the year or over winter. If I'm not intending to feed, I'll always use one that's kind of not got a hole in. There's no real need for a hole in the top. The bees will regulate the humidity and temperature of the hive by fanning at the entrance to circulate any air around. So there's no need to have a hole to let sort of like air evaporate or sort of air rise up and out. So we've got the smoke, I might as well just kind of give them a quick puff on the top, drive all the bees down, and then pop this on, hopefully without squashing too many bees. Yeah, see, they've all pretty much gone now. And with these cover boards that are almost touching the frames, I find if you just kind of, in fact there's a lot of bits of wax comb on top of these frames just holding it up, so it's not kind of dropping straight down on top of the timber frames. So plenty of space for the bees to get out of the way and even walk around on top of those frames. So just press it down a little bit, but not enough to squash the bees, and then pop the lid on. Pop a brick back on top just to keep the lid down, and that's the job done for today. Cheerio!